What I've got behind me here is one of the most awesome air compressors I have ever seen, and I want to show you guys some things about this. Just a quick archive video from my own personal archives regarding this air compressor that I just purchased. This is a fairly nice air compressor. This is the motor that came with it. This is not the name of the air compressor. The air compressor is actually a old CNC air compressor. One of the most awesome air compressors I think I've ever seen. This is a 4-cylinder, and it had this strange manifold on the top of it with a drain on there. I would imagine this is because it's designed for high flow and not high pressure. I say that because the pulley on there is enormous. So it's probably getting pretty good RPMs, and it's rated for 125 PSIs, which is fairly low, in my opinion, for a compressor this size. So I'm assuming that it's made specifically for a CNC table, perhaps, because they do require a huge amount of air, more than your average air compressor can crank out. So when I took this thing apart, I noticed that there is indeed another failure point when it comes to these air compressors. You can't really see it. So as you can see here in this image, the reed valve seats are actually highly susceptible to corrosion. So that is yet another failure point of air compressors. I used to always worry about the rings and just dirt getting in the reeds and holding them open. These reeds did in fact have dirt underneath them down away from the valve seat, which kind of made them stayed lifted up in the air a little bit higher than they should have been. So there was a lot of crud. Definitely want to have a good air filter on your air compressor for reasons like this alone. Very well on these ones. I've sanded them just a little bit because they had a bunch of corrosion on them. But a couple of them have corrosion and pitting that is so bad that it bleeds all the way through the seal, like that one right there. That's a complete leak. You can see they're just in really bad shape. So this is indeed a second failure point. It is the reed valve seat. Here are all the reed valves for this compressor. Unfortunately, several of them are broken. And I broke them removing them because a lot of these screws had completely rusted in place. They could not be removed. The heads completely rusted off of them, except for just a little bit. Okay, so there's my fix for the broken reeds. I decided to put them in the position where they'll always be laying down. I had to buy new screws, and I will have to cut these nubs off, but I'm gonna let the JB Weld dry before I cut them back nubs off. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit and throw that top gasket on, and I hope that will be enough to kind of pinch these reeds in place, and we'll get this compressor back down the road. All right, fellas, so I got this thing up and running finally. Everything seems to be okay, and I wanted to share with you a couple of tricks that I've deployed on this job. One of the tricks is a mechanized belt tensioner, just using some bolts. You can see I have a piece of angle iron welded to the motor frame and a piece of angle iron welded to the compressor frame. And I'm just using these bolts to pull tension in the belt versus the traditional method, which can be a big pain in the neck. I can also angle the motor perfectly using this system. In addition to that, when you have an air compressor of this capacity, you have some options here. When it comes to draining your tank, it's something that should be done every day, but let's face it, no one does it. What I've done here, I don't know if you can hear that, is a tiny little hiss. Just barely anything. It'll take this tank hours to drain down, but what this does is allows a continual draining process. So as water develops, it immediately weeps out of the bottom of the tank. So it's on a continuous weep, and the weep is such insignificance in flow that it does not inhibit the performance of the machine at all. I mean, we've got a 4-cylinder air compressor here, and any of you guys who have any input on this motor, let me know. Like, why is this thing getting so hot so fast? It just scares me. 140 degrees on B-class insulation with just one tank cycle. I can't imagine what this thing's like running when you're using air tools or something. Okay guys, we got a big problem here. We're pulling 19 amps. This is about 4,500 watts of power. That's just not right. Something's wrong with this motor. I don't know what yet, but let's test it out anyway while it's running hot. I mean, we just fired this thing up. Something's amiss. Our starter winding's sticking on or something, I don't know. I don't think this motor's wired. Let's see how this thing compares to a 6.5 horsepower air compressor, a gas one. I'm going to run this nozzle in this very same hose, and we'll see what type of back pressure we show on the regulator. So basically this thing just stomped a 6.5 horsepower air compressor. Of course, the engine was not the limiting factor on that performance. I guess it's pretty obvious why I'm pulling so many amps. I don't know about you guys, but that looks like cooked motor to me. She's cooked. She is cooked. We got black wire. So, many things could have happened here. Sometimes what kills these motors is your centrifugal switch will get stuck in the on position and the start winding will just sit there and cook itself. Though I cannot conclude that's what happened to this one. It certainly is an event that takes place. So the motor's shot. We're going to take it off. We're going to leave this lower deck piece, of course, but nonetheless, I'm glad that we figured that out, man. That was really puzzling me. I knew this thing should only be pulling 10 amps. You pull half the amperage when you double the voltage. That's just how it works. And here I am, like running at 6 horsepower. So there you go, fellas. We're 2 days into this, and it begs the question, how much money do you save on these hot buys? Now in 2 days I could have made about $1,600 at my average going rate. I probably could have bought a fairly decent air compressor for that much money. So wasting 2 days of my time messing around with this thing, I don't know if I'm at a loss or not. It is an amazing air compressor, but I've always wondered, you know, what is the purpose of all this salvaging I do at this day and age? I mean, sometimes it's just not economically viable to do so. I mean, now I got to go out and buy a motor and hook up to this thing and spend another half day doing all that. It'll take every bit of a half day to go buy a motor, bring it back here, and get it hooked up to this thing. So here's another $500 some. So whether or not this was a good deal, I don't know yet. But it is a pretty interesting experience nonetheless, and some valuable information was discovered in the process.